is there a case that might be bigger that we know about that rings a lot of bells for you, that you're like, people are not looking at this one piece of evidence, or they have somebody that you don't believe is the right person in custody? Or is there anything kind of in the back of your head that doesn't make sense to you?
Yeah, I think going back to Long Island, just because I did do the Unraveled podcast and and I'm from Long Island, the fact that we've got four murders. It's he might have done the others, he might not have, but I think that I'm worried that everyone's just like, oh, the Long Island serial killer was caught, and they're not going to look at these other six murders. And that's a case that I actually worked on when before it was even a Long Island serial killer. Like I worked on the Peaches case, who was a black woman whose body was found in a Hempstead Lake Park, Hempstead Town Lake Park, and also her parts of her body and her baby were found along Ocean Parkway.
Mhm.
I had worked that back in in 2002 or something like that. I had sent a reporter out to do one of the cases of the women that were found in the Pine Barrens back in 2003 or something. So I've been connected to that case, and being from Long Island and everything, and having worked it, and having interviewed a lot of different people that were on it. So I really want to see all of those victims get the same amount of play. Obviously, Shannon Gilbert, who I think that was a death of misadventure. I don't think she was the initial
Mhm.
woman. She was able to bring so much light onto the case. But and now, obviously the four women, the canonical Gilgo four, but the other victims out there, I definitely want to see. And there's other victims that are similar on Long Island that I would like to see solved. There's one victim that's known as Cherries. A lot of unidentified victims that are out there. And Long Island you had a lot of serial killers on Long
Yeah.
Island. In my hometown, I had two. I had Joel Rifkin and a guy named Robert Schulman. And
Oh,
Joel
wow.
Rifkin still has the number. He's got 17 serial killings, and and when they interviewed him actually and he said that the Long Island serial killer was sloppy, he would have never put the bodies all in one location. That was back before they had solved it.
Wow. So do you think the six bodies that still have not been tied to Rex, the guy who has been, is that his name? That has been
Hmm.
accused of the murders of the other four, do you think it is likely that he is the one that is responsible for those deaths, or do you think there is another person that could
There's
be
de-
attributed?
Yeah, he's not responsible for all of them. The Manorville two, who are the women who were dismembered in Manorville, and their heads were found in Gilgo or along Ocean Parkway. Possibility, though they were killed before the other four. It's a possibility, and we had thought about that maybe this guy had initially, in order to hide the victims' identities, had gone through the trouble of chopping them up,
Mhm.
excuse me, and then when nobody found them, thought, you know what, why am I going through this, and I'll just bury them. That definitely could have happened. Could have been somebody else. Could have been a guy named John Bittrolf, who is in prison right now. You've got Peaches and the baby. You've got an Asian male who is dressed in women's clothing. You've got a lot of other bodies that are not even. So I don't think he did Peaches, or I just don't see that. No.
It's so interesting because I would love to be a fly on the wall in those conversations that police are having with them. I'm so curious if their tactic would be they just want to get a conviction on
Yeah.
some of these deaths, or if they're going to come up with some sort of a plea deal because they want the answers.
You know what though? They didn't do that with GSK. I was hoping to do that with Golden State Killer, where the plea deal that they had to do for him, listen, they saved a lot of money by giving him a plea deal, because that
Hmm.
trial would have gone on and on and on, would have cost the state millions and millions of dollars. But I thought that if they gave him a plea deal, maybe he would give other evidence and say, oh, by the way, I also did this, this, and this crime. Because there was a ton of crimes that he easily could have done. If he
Hmm.
stopped, when they say he stopped, that's fine. But there was a lot of crimes in between when he was the Visalia ransacker until when he was caught, when he stopped. He didn't say anything and still hasn't said anything, so I was hoping that that would happen, but that's not necessarily the case. They'll just say, all right, you're guilty for these, and then that's it. So
Yeah.
I would like to find out from Golden State Killer. And I tried after that happened, after they finally got him. My first thought was, okay, they got him, build a timeline on where this guy was.
Yeah.
And, he was overseas and then he was back here, and who else could he have murdered? And found a couple people who thought they definitely had been in contact with him, and found one woman who saw his picture and said that was definitely the man that attacked me.
I'm so curious because you've worked so long on this Gilgo Beach case. Have you ever tried to reach out to the wife? I mean, I feel like she's somebody who obviously wants to talk since she's doing a Peacock special, and because you know so much about this, I feel like you can infiltrate
Yeah,
her.
that woman's not talking because she's getting paid to talk by Peacock, so
Right.
she'll never say anything for the most part, unless it's really to potentially help the trial or something like that. She's
Right.
saving it all for that.
For her
And
big
quite
reveal. Yeah.
frankly, what else? What is she going to say? Is she going to say, "Oh, I knew he was doing that"? Then you're complicit. It's just she's
Right.
not going to have anything really.
Yeah.
They already know timeline wise. Yes, they were out of the state when he did these crimes, and we knew it was probably something along those lines because he would always pick. He picked, weekends. He picked days when it was usually in the summer. And it turns out his family was away. And we thought that was definitely a possibility, that this guy was going to be somebody that, we knew he was probably a South Shore guy, which he was.
Mm.
But they did certain things like they knew he had been calling, victims, using the victim's phone to call the sister of one of the victims. And they traced the call, but they didn't record the call. It's like there's just like sloppy things like that happened. But again, I go back to that they had it right there. When you have a 6'7" ogre of a man that drives a Chevy Avalanche, there's not many people that are like that. Nobody had
Right.
a Chevy. I don't think I've ever seen a Chevy Avalanche on Long Island, and that was not a common car. So the fact that they could have just gone through Chevy Avalanches and done interviews and found the ogre and been able to go from there. They could have gotten this done within a month. And then it makes you realize, like, wow, I don't whether he had stopped by then or not, who knows. It's very easy that he could have stopped it in the same way that Golden State Killer stopped, we think, right around the same time that DNA became part of criminal investigations. There was a case in England, and it was just like, it seems like he stopped right around that time.
Right.
This guy, it seems like he stopped, if he did, right around, obviously when they found the bodies and it became front page news.
I'm curious because you're so heavily involved in true crime. Do you have a favorite podcast or a show or a network that you really love?
A network? No. I've, as far as true crime goes, I never really, I would watch them because they were in the zeitgeist or listen to them.
Uh-huh.
Serial, I listened to because I knew the case was unsolved because he was still in jail.
Mm.
And because I had been pitching Hollywood to do unsolved cases for so long, and they never would do it. That's one of the good things that has changed. They would never ever do unsolved cases,
Hmm.
and unless it was John Bonet, and the fact that so I was watching Serial or listening to Serial, and then I was like, all right, well, how are they going to handle this? Because people are going to be pissed off when there's no ending,
Mm.
and people were okay with it, and that opened the door to, because I used to pitch ID all the time. I got so close with a show on ID, and we had done a pilot, and then they said, yeah, we had a crisis of faith, and we don't want to have a anything that's open ended. And I was like, you have 24 hours of programming that's about murders that have been solved. Why not just give back an hour to try to have people try and solve things? And that used to
Yeah.
piss me off so bad. And Oxygen was actually the one that started doing more of the unsolved stuff, which is good on them. But yeah, no, I don't listen to that many podcasts or anything like that. There's certain people that I know that do really good work. Payne Lindsay, I think, does good work. Any podcast that's actually going to go interview people, I'll listen to. Or if it's really, really good writing. There's a podcast called Disgraceland, which I think is a
Mm.
really good writing. But there's a lot of them that are just, if it's a podcast that has actually done the investigative work, I'll check it out. But most
Yeah,
of the
a lot
time,
of
it's a
them are
lot of
regurgitating
yeah,
the news that's already
which
out
is
there.
more power to them, which is not my thing.